The pregnant witch who toppled a throne. In the ancient kingdom of Eldoria, where the sun seldom shone through the thick mist and the trees whispered secrets to the wind, magic was feared more than death. Among the many legends that haunted the lands, one name was never spoken aloud: Eldoria. Eldoria had once been a healer, beloved by the people for her gentle hands and her gift of foresight. But when King Malik rose to power, magic was outlawed. He declared all witches enemies of the crown, and began a brutal purge. Eldora's coven was burned, her village razed, and her love, Captain Thorn, the king's former guard, was executed for refusing to betray her. Eldoria escaped, barely alive, and secretly carrying Thorn's child. For 7 long years, she lived in the shadows, hiding in the wilds beyond the king's reach. During this time her magic deepened, fed not by hatred, but by grief and love for the unborn child she now carried, delayed by a spell that kept her pregnancy suspended until her revenge was complete. As she wandered through the forgotten parts of Eldoria, ancient spirits whispered to her, old gods tested her, and elemental powers bent before her sorrowful will. She was no longer just a healer, she had become something far greater. Something terrible. On the eve of the king's birthday, Eldoria appeared at the gates of Eldoria, cloaked in storm clouds and moonlight. Her swollen belly glowing faintly with runes of protection. The guards laughed until their laughter turned to screams. With a wave of her hand, the iron gates twisted like vines. Stone crumbled. Flames danced where her feet touched the ground. She walked straight into the palace. The king, old and bitter now, stood before his golden throne, flanked by trembling advisors and mercenaries. "You dare return?" he spat. "You, a witch and a traitor." "No," she said calmly. "I am justice. And I bring with me the last of your bloodline." The court gasped as her belly pulsed with a faint light. With a whisper in the old tongue, Eldoria raised her arms, and the throne cracked in two. Not just the chair of power, but the very symbol of Malik's rule. The hall shook as illusions broke apart, revealing years of lies, tortured spirits, and hidden truths. Malik tried to flee, but his feet were rooted to the floor by shadows of those he had killed. "I won't kill you," Eldoria said. "Your legacy dies with your throne. You will live forgotten, a king of dust." She turned and walked away, the baby within her glowing brighter, the kingdom behind her collapsing, not in fire, but in freedom. The people of Eldoria, long oppressed, rose that very night. By dawn, the name Malik was cursed. And Eldoria, the witch who had toppled the throne, vanished into the mist once more. The pregnant witch who toppled a throne. In the forgotten kingdom of Eldoria, where magic was feared and monarchs ruled with iron fists, lived a woman unlike any other. Her name was Eldoria, a witch, a healer, a rebel. And she was with child. For centuries, witches were hunted in Eldoria, forced to hide in forests and mountains. But Eldoria had dared to stay close to the capital. She posed as a midwife, tending to the poor and sick in the shadow of the palace walls. But Eldoria carried more than a child, she carried a prophecy. Years ago, she had fallen in love with Prince Kale, the king's only son. Their love was secret, hidden from the world. When the king discovered their affair, he banished Kale to the borders and ordered Eldoria's execution. She barely escaped with her life, and with Kale's unborn heir in her womb. The people whispered legends of a child born of fire and magic, destined to break the old order. Eldoria believed the time had come. As her belly grew, so did her power. The land itself responded to her will. Trees whispered secrets, rivers shifted course, and birds flew as her eyes directed. Her connection with nature deepened. She was no longer just a witch. She was becoming a force of destiny. The king, a cruel man named Eric, felt unease in his bones. His spies brought tales of a woman in the woods healing the sick and speaking of justice. Fearing rebellion, he sent his knights to burn the forests and hunt down this witch. But Eldoria was ready. One night, under a blood-red moon, she walked into the capital alone, unarmed, barefoot. The guards tried to stop her, but their swords melted in their hands. The gates creaked open before her. The people watched in silence as she walked toward the palace. The throne room trembled as she entered. King Eric rose, fury in his eyes. "Witch!" he roared. Eldoria smiled calmly, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Your time is over, Eric. The true heir grows within me." The chandelier shattered. Flames burst from the marble floor. Vines cracked through the walls. The power of nature and magic roared to life. Eric tried to flee, but roots tangled his legs. The ground swallowed the throne itself. Eldoria did not kill him. She let him live, to witness the end of his rule. In the days that followed, the people rose. Eldoria became a symbol of hope. She didn't claim the throne for herself, but declared a council of wise elders and healers to lead Eldoria. And when her child was born, a girl with silver eyes and flames in her hair, they named her Eldoria, the Flameborn. The witch who toppled a throne didn't do it with armies or blades. She did it with love, with pain, with the fierce power of motherhood. And so, a new age. The Flameborn heir. Years passed since the fall of King Eric. Eldoria was no longer ruled by fear and greed but guided by the Council of Light, healers, wise men, and elementalists. At its heart stood Elira, not as queen, but as protector. Her daughter, Elira, grew too fast. By the age of 5, she could summon fire with her breath and speak to the stars in her sleep. The people called her Flameborn, a child of prophecy. But peace, as always, was temporary. In the dark corners of the fallen kingdom, loyalists of the old king stirred. Eric, now a broken man, had vanished into the northern wastes. Some whispered that he had bargained with darker forces, things older than magic. Shadows linked, and in the mountains, crops began to rot. Nightmares plagued the children. Elira knew this was only the beginning. One evening as she bathed Elira beneath the silver waterfall, the sky turned black. A voice echoed across the wind, "Not human, not beast. She is not yours alone, witch. She is the key." Then silence. Elira clutched her daughter tightly, her heart pounding. Something ancient had awakened. That night, Elira called a secret council meeting. "We've only toppled a throne," she said. "We haven't ended the war. My daughter's birth has shifted the balance." An elder stepped forward. "Do you know who the child truly is?" Elira hesitated. "She's the heir to a new age." The elder shook his head. "No, she's the gatekeeper. The fire in her blood can awaken what sleeps beneath the world." Elira felt cold. "Then we must protect her." The council agreed, but it was too late. Elira had already been marked. From the shadows, a hooded man emerged. His eyes glowed red like coals. He called himself the Ash King, a sorcerer banished long ago by the first witches. He claimed to be Elira's rightful guardian, the keeper of ancient power. He promised to raise her to rule all realms, not just Eldoria. And he was coming. Elira knew she would have to fight once more, not just for her daughter, but for the fate of the entire world. The rise of the Ash King and the coming trials for Elira and her daughter Elira. The rise of the Ash King. The fires in the east burned for 7 nights. Villages vanished under ash and smoke. Survivors spoke of a man cloaked in shadow, who walked through flames untouched. The Ash King had returned. He didn't command armies. He commanded fear. Elira stood atop the moonspire, watching the horizon burn. Elira stood beside her, silent. Her silver eyes shimmered with power she could not yet control. "He's calling me," the child whispered. "In dreams. In fire." Elira knelt beside her. "He will never take you. You are not his." But deep inside, Elira feared it wasn't that simple. Elira was born of fire and prophecy. The Ash King was drawn to her for a reason, maybe even a right. To protect her daughter, Elira invoked the old magic, runes carved in bone, blood spilled under moonlight, oaths whispered to the earth. She summoned the guardians, ancient beings bound to protect balance. Only 2 answered. The others were silent. "The world is tipping," one of the guardians said. "Too much magic in one child. She is a beacon, both to light and to darkness." That night the Ash King appeared, not in flesh, but in flame. A ring of fire surrounded Elira's home. He stood beyond it, his voice echoing like thunder. "Give her to me, witch. I will not ask again." Elira stepped forward, her hands glowing green with power. "Come take her yourself." He only laughed. The throne fell easily. "You think I will?" And then, he vanished. But the damage had been done. The people began to whisper. Fear returned. Some believed Elira was cursed. Others blamed Elira for provoking the Ash King. The council began to fracture. Elira was forced to flee with her daughter once again, into the old forest, into hiding. She built a sanctuary within the roots of the tree where magic was thick and time moved differently. Here, she trained Elira in secret, teaching her control, patience, resistance. But Elira was growing stronger. And stranger. She began to hear voices in the trees. See things in mirrors. Her fire would sometimes burn blue, unnatural and cold. Elira feared the Ash King was reaching her through dreams, through blood. And then one morning Elira awoke to find Elira gone. Burned into the tree's roots were 3 words. She chose me. Part 4, The Path of Shadows. Elira's heart raced as she rushed through the forest, her every step heavy with dread. The tree had whispered in its ancient tongue, its bark slick with the moisture of her tears. Her daughter was gone. And she knew, deep down, that Elira had not been taken by force, she had chosen to leave. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. Elira was becoming something beyond her mother's control, beyond anyone's reach. She was no longer just the Flameborn, she was the key to an ancient power, one that could reshape the world. But to what end? The Ash King's voice echoed in her mind. She chose me. Elira had no choice but to follow. For days, she traversed the wildlands, the mountains where time unraveled, the valleys where shadows stretched endlessly, and the desolate ruins of Eldoria's forgotten cities. The deeper she went, the more the air grew thick with dark magic. Each step was a step into the heart of an ancient curse. Finally, she found the entrance to the Underrealm, a vast, cavernous place where light never reached. The Ash King's domain. As Elira entered the darkness, the temperature dropped, and whispers filled the air promising power, knowledge and freedom. But Elira knew better than to trust them. She reached the center of the Underrealm, a throne room carved from living stone, with walls adorned with skulls and burning embers. In the center of it all sat Elira, her silver eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Her hair danced with fire, but it was cold, colder than ice. Elira stood as Elira approached, the fire in her eyes brightening. Mother. I found it. The truth. Elira's heart broke. Elira, please. Come home. No, Mother, Elira whispered. This is where I was always meant to be. This is my destiny. The Ash King stepped forward from the shadows, his form shifting in the flames. His eyes were crimson, his voice smooth like oil. She is mine now. The child is the bridge. Through her, I will rule all realms. Elira took a step back, her magic crackling at her fingertips. You will not have her. I'll never let you corrupt her. The Ash King laughed, a sound that rattled the bones. It is too late, witch. Her fire is mine. Her magic will unlock the gates of the Underrealm, and the world will bow to the flames. The temperature dropped even further, and the flames around them twisted into shadows. Elira could feel her strength waning, the magic in the air suffocating her. But she couldn't stop now. Elira, she called, her voice soft but firm. You are not his. You are not a weapon. You are a child of the earth, a flame of love. You were born to heal, to protect, not to destroy. Elira's eyes flickered with doubt. The fire within her dimmed for a moment, but then a cold, sinister laugh escaped her lips. I am not your little girl anymore, Mother. I've seen what lies beyond. The Ash King has shown me the power I was born to wield. No. Elira cried out, her magic flaring around her. You don't have to do this. You are stronger than this darkness. You are stronger than him. For a moment, it seemed like Elira might break, like she was torn between the love for her mother and the seductive pull of the Ash King's power. But then, as if a final choice had been made, Elira stepped forward, her hands igniting in a blaze of white-hot flame. The ground beneath them cracked open. I am the key, Elira declared. And the world will burn. The Ash King's laughter echoed as Elira's heart shattered. Her daughter had chosen her path, and it was one that would bring chaos, not salvation. But Elira wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. As Elira raised her hands ready to unleash the full fury of the magic within her, Elira gathered all the power she had left. The tree's magic coursed through her veins, the ancient runes of life and death painting her skin in glowing symbols. With a cry of defiance, she hurled her magic at the flames, casting them into the shadows. Elira. Elira's voice was a desperate plea. Fight it. You are more than this. For a brief, flickering moment, Elira's eyes softened. The flame dimmed, and she looked at her mother, a tear falling down her cheek. I don't know if I can, Mother. But the Ash King was no longer just a shadow. He was here, in flesh and flame, and he was not going to let this moment slip away. With one final, overwhelming blast of dark magic, he struck out, sending Elira flying into the cavern's stone walls. Elira gasped, a tear of fire falling from her eye as she collapsed to her knees, her power unstable. The world around them trembled, the boundaries between realms thinning. Elira knew the only way to save her daughter, and the world, was to do the unthinkable. She had to destroy the bridge between realms. With every ounce of her strength, Elira reached into Elira's mind, touching the core of the magic that held her. She whispered words of love, of hope, of the light they had once shared. Then she broke the connection. The earth shook, the ground cracking open beneath them. The Ash King screamed as his power was torn apart. Elira cried out, her body racked with the conflict between the two forces. And then, the world went silent. The final choice. Silence fell across the Underrealm, a suffocating, oppressive silence. The flames that once roared and twisted like serpents slowly flickered and dimmed. The ground trembled beneath them as the realm itself seemed to react to the rupture of power that had just taken place. Eldoria knelt on the stone floor, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. Her silver eyes were clouded with confusion, fear, and pain. Her body trembled as the fire that had once been her strength now threatened to consume her from within. Eldoria staggered to her feet, her body battered but her spirit unbroken. She looked at her daughter, her precious child, and her heart shattered once more. Eldoria was torn between two worlds, the one of love, of protection of her mother, and the one of power, destruction, and darkness. The Ash King, now a mere shadow of his former self, lay crumpled on the ground. His form flickered and faded, the darkness dissipating like smoke in the wind. He had been undone, his hold over Eldoria broken, his power shattered. But the damage was done. Eldoria's voice was soft, yet filled with an intensity that seemed to echo in the very walls of the Underrealm. Eldoria, you are not what they said you were. You are not a weapon. You are not a key to destruction. You are my daughter, and you have the power to change the world not by burning it, but by healing it. Eldoria's gaze flickered up, meeting her mother's eyes. The fire that had once burned so brightly within her flickered uncertainly. I don't know if I can, Mother. I feel the power inside me. It's overwhelming. Eldoria stepped forward, her voice gentle but unwavering. You are stronger than this, Eldoria. The fire is a part of you, but it does not control you. You control it. You always have. Don't let it define you, let it guide you. Eldoria looked down at her hands, the flames still dancing in her palms, but now they were no longer cold. They were warm, alive with the possibility of creation, not destruction. Slowly, the fire began to settle, its intensity waning as the connection to the darkness faded. But even as the flames dimmed, Eldoria knew the battle was not yet over. The power that had been unleashed could not be undone in an instant. The world had been changed irrevocably, and the balance of magic was now fragile. Mother. I'm scared, Eldoria whispered. I don't know how to fix this. Eldoria knelt beside her daughter, placing a hand on her trembling shoulder. You don't have to fix everything at once. One step at a time. You are not alone, Eldoria. You have me, and you have the world. Together, we can rebuild. Eldoria nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty but also with a glimmer of hope. But what about the world? What about Eldoria? Eldoria looked up, her gaze steady. The flames in her daughter's hands were fading, and with them, the power that had threatened to tear the world apart. We will restore balance, Eldoria. We will rebuild Eldoria, not through conquest or fire, but through healing. Through magic that gives, not takes. And so they stood there, amidst the ruins of the Underrealm, their future uncertain but their bond stronger than ever. Eldoria had saved her daughter, not with power, but with love, and in that love, Eldoria had found the strength to choose her own path. As they emerged from the depths of the Underrealm, the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting its warm light across the land. The world was broken, but not beyond repair. The ashes of the past could be used to fertilize the seeds of the future. Eldoria was not lost. It was only beginning. A new dawn. Years passed, and the flames of war and fear were extinguished, replaced by the light of hope and healing. Eldoria, now a young woman, stood at the head of the Council of Elders. She had inherited not only her mother's magic, but also her wisdom, her compassion, and her strength. Together Eldoria and Eldoria had rebuilt Eldoria, not through conquest, but through unity. The people once divided by fear, now stood together, guided by the magic of healing, and the lessons learned from the past. The Ash King was no more, and his legacy faded into myth. But the lessons he left behind were not forgotten. Power without compassion could destroy, but power with purpose could rebuild. Eldoria, the flame-born, stood as a beacon of hope for the future. And Eldoria, the witch who had toppled a throne, watched with pride as her daughter led the way into a new era, one where magic was no longer feared, but cherished. And so the story of the pregnant witch who toppled a throne came to an end, not in fire and blood, but in the quiet strength of a mother's love, and a daughter's choice. The weight of the flame. Years after the fall of the Ash King and the rise of a new Eldoria, Eldoria and Eldoria stood atop the newly rebuilt citadel, looking out over the vast kingdom they had fought so hard to protect. The land, once scarred by fire and darkness, now flourished with life. The fields were green again, the forests lush, and the rivers clear. Eldoria was healing. But peace, Elira had learned, was not something that could be taken for granted. Every decision, every action, carried the weight of the past. Elira had grown into a wise leader, her silver eyes no longer glowing with the restless fire of her youth but filled with the calm assurance of one who understood the true cost of power. Yet, even now, she bore the scars of her early choices, the uncertainty, the pain, and the magic that still burned within her. One morning, Elira came to her mother, her expression troubled. "I received a message from the southern realms today. There are whispers of old magic stirring again, something that seeks to disrupt the peace we fought for." Elira nodded, sensing the familiar unease. Even after everything they had been through, the threat of chaos never truly disappeared. "What kind of magic?" "It's said to be ancient, older than even the Ash King," Elira replied, her voice low. "It's calling itself the Eclipse Order, a group of sorcerers who claim to be the true heirs of the old ways. They believe the world should be ruled by magic, not by the people." Elira's heart sank. The echoes of the past, the fear, the desire for control were never far behind. The temptation of dark power always found a way to resurface. "They will not stop until they have what they want," Elira continued, turning toward her mother. "But I am unsure. Should we strike first, or wait for them to come to us?" Elira placed a hand on Elira's shoulder, the weight of leadership heavy in her touch. "You've learned well, daughter. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in action, but in patience. Let them come. But we must be prepared. We cannot allow the past to repeat itself." But Elira's gaze hardened, the fire within her flickering once again, though this time tempered with purpose. "I will not let them destroy what we've built. I will protect this kingdom, no matter the cost." Elira knew the words Elira spoke were not just those of a ruler. They were the words of a woman who had once stood on the edge of the darkness, and had chosen to pull herself back. "You will protect it," Elira agreed, her voice steady. "But you must remember, power is not always won by strength alone. It is found in understanding and compassion. Your fire is your greatest gift, but it is also your greatest responsibility." Elira looked out across the kingdom once more, the wind carrying with it the scent of distant storms. "I understand, mother. I will not fail you, or the people of Eldoria." The Eclipse Order came faster than anyone had expected. They struck from the shadows, spreading fear and whispers of a new world, a world where magic ruled unchallenged. They called themselves the true heirs of the old kings, claiming that Eldoria's magic had been corrupted by the witches and their rule of peace. The first battles were fought quietly, hidden within the forests and the mountain passes. The Eclipse Order's influence spread like a shadow over the land, infiltrating the hearts of those who had once believed in the Council of Light. Elira, now fully grown into her role as protector, led the charge against them, not with fire alone, but with wisdom and resolve. She learned that the true strength of her power lay not in the flames that could burn down kingdoms, but in the bonds she had formed and the trust she had built with her people. Her mother Elira stood beside her every step of the way, quietly guiding her, helping her understand the true cost of leadership. But as the battles raged on, Elira knew that this would be Elira's defining moment. It would not be enough to simply defeat the Eclipse Order. The true test would be whether Elira could prevent history from repeating itself, whether she could stop the cycle of darkness that had haunted their world for centuries. And so the final confrontation came, on the eve of the winter solstice, beneath a sky painted with the colors of fire and shadow. The Eclipse Order had gathered in the heart of Eldoria, their power at its peak, ready to bring the kingdom to its knees. But Elira had a different plan. Rather than confronting them with violence, she challenged their leader to a duel of magic. This would not be a battle of fire, but of will of heart. The Eclipse Order's leader, a dark sorcerer whose name was lost to time, stood before Elira, his eyes cold and calculating. "You think you can stop us with your weak, corrupt peace? You are nothing but the last flicker of an age that is already dead." Elira stood tall, her silver eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. "I am not the last flicker," she said, her voice calm. "I am the flame that will light the way forward. You may have once ruled through fear, but I rule through understanding. Your time is over." The battle was fought not with force, but with words and will. The sorcerer attempted to summon the dark powers of the old magic, but Eldora's connection to the earth, to the people, to her own heart was stronger. She called upon the fire within her, not to destroy, but to purify. In the end, the Eclipse order crumbled, not from the weight of magic, but from the power of a unified people who had seen the truth of Eldora's strength. A flame rekindled. Years later, Eldoria stood once again at the citadel, looking out over Eldoria. The kingdom had flourished in ways she could never have imagined. It was not just a land of magic, but a land of peace and hope. People from every walk of life, whether magical or not, had come together to rebuild. Eldoria, now an elder, sat beside her daughter, watching the sunset. The fire within Eldoria was no longer a raging force, it was a steady warming flame that guided Eldoria forward. "You did it," Eldoria said softly. "You broke the cycle." Eldoria smiled, her eyes full of wisdom and light. "No, mother. We did it. Together." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final golden light over the kingdom. And so the flame of Eldoria burned brighter than ever, guided by the legacy of the pregnant witch who toppled a throne, and the daughter who brought balance to the world. Years had passed since Eldoria's triumph over the Eclipse order, and the kingdom of Eldoria had entered an era of peace. But the quiet of the realm held an unspoken tension. For all the victories and celebrations, a new generation was growing up, one that had never known the firestorms of war or the shadow of the Ash King. The flame of history was becoming a distant memory for them, a story to be told by elders, rather than a living, breathing force that shaped the world. Eldoria stood in the great hall of the citadel, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. Her mother Eldoria had passed into the realm of spirits many years ago, but her teachings had remained, guiding Eldoria every step of the way. The flame that had once been an uncontrollable force within her had become a symbol of hope for Eldoria, a fire that warmed the hearts of the people and lit their path forward. But leadership was never easy, and even the brightest flame could cast long shadows. The Council of Elders had been growing uneasy with Eldoria's decisions. Some of the younger leaders had begun questioning the direction of Eldoria. They argued that magic, once used to heal and restore, was now treated with too much reverence. They believed that the time had come for Eldoria to embrace the advancements of technology, to move away from the reliance on magic and the old ways that had once brought the kingdom to the brink of destruction. Eldoria stood at the head of the council, listening to the heated arguments that surrounded her. The debate was fierce, each side pleading for a future that was either magical or mechanized. "The old ways are not the answer," one of the younger council members, Darius, exclaimed. "We need to move forward, into a future where magic is no longer the guiding force. We need innovation, not ancient rituals." Eldoria's silver eyes glowed softly, but her expression remained calm. She had heard these arguments before, and she understood the desire for change. The world was evolving, and Eldoria had to adapt. But how far could they go without losing the essence of what had made them strong? How much of the flame could they preserve without allowing it to burn everything to the ground? "You speak of innovation," Eldoria said, her voice measured. "But what are we without the lessons of our past? Magic is not just a force, it is a connection to the land, to the people. If we sever that connection, what do we become?" Darius clenched his fists in frustration. "You're clinging to old ways, Eldoria. You cannot hold back progress. If you continue to refuse change, you risk leaving Eldoria behind." Eldoria felt the weight of those words, felt the burden of her mother's legacy pressing against her chest. She had already faced the temptation of power in the past. She had overcome the Ash King's darkness, but now she was faced with a different kind of challenge, a choice between embracing the future and preserving the past. In the quiet after the debate, Eldoria retired to the chambers that had once belonged to Eldoria, her mother's presence still lingering in the room. The shelves were lined with old tomes filled with the wisdom of ages. Eldoria's hand brushed over the worn pages of a book her mother had written, the very book that had taught her the magic of balance and harmony. Eldoria had never thought of herself as a scholar, but in this moment, she understood how much her mother had sacrificed to keep the balance. Sitting in the silence, Eldoria reflected on the choice before her. She could choose to lead Eldoria down a path of technology and progress, a path that might ensure peace and prosperity, but at what cost? Would they lose the magic, the connection that had once saved them all? Her mind wandered to the legends of the old world, the stories of the powerful sorcerers who had once ruled with tyranny and control. Their technology, their machines had been powerful, but it was also hollow. It had cost them their hearts, their souls. Eldoria could not repeat the mistakes of the past. Magic and technology could coexist, but only if they were held in balance. And then, a thought crossed her mind. She knew what had to be done. The next day, Eldoria addressed the council again. She was no longer the young, uncertain leader she had once been. Her resolve had hardened, her understanding deepened. The debates were quieter this time, more reflective. Eldoria is at a crossroads, she began. We cannot cling to the past as though it is the only way forward. But we also cannot abandon the very essence of what makes us who we are. Magic has been the heart of our kingdom, and it will remain so. But we must also embrace change responsibly, wisely. She looked at the members of the council, her gaze steady and unyielding. We will not sever the ties that bind us to the earth, but we will learn to use new tools, new methods to ensure that our future is secure. We will forge a new path, one that honors our history but does not live in its shadow. There was a long silence as the council absorbed her words. Darius, who had once been her greatest critic, stood up slowly. And how do you propose we begin? Eldoria smiled, a spark of the fire that had once burned brightly within her igniting once more. We will build bridges, not walls. We will combine the old magic with new technology, carefully with respect. Together, we will forge a future where magic and innovation serve the people, not the other way around. The council murmured in agreement. Eldoria knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and those who would resist. But she was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. She had learned from her mother's legacy, learning when to fight and when to listen, when to lead with strength and when to lead with compassion. As the sun set over Eldoria, Eldoria stood by the windows of the citadel, looking out at the horizon. The flame within her still burned bright, but now it was tempered by the wisdom of her years, by the lessons of both the past and the future. Eldoria was at the dawn of a new age, one where the flame of magic would never be extinguished, but where the light of progress would guide their way. And for the first time in years, Eldoria allowed herself to believe that the future, while uncertain, would be bright. The cracks in the foundation. The new era had dawned in Eldoria, and with it came the weight of Eldoria's decisions. The integration of magic and technology, once seen as a hopeful future, was now met with mixed reactions. While many celebrated the progress, others began to see the unintended consequences of change. The first signs of trouble appeared in the eastern reaches of the kingdom, where the land, once fertile and teeming with life, began to wither. The magic that had once sustained the soil seemed to be weakening, and the new mechanical methods of farming, though efficient, did not seem to fully replace the natural connection between the people and the earth. Eldoria stood before the council once more, her brow furrowed with concern. The reports had been coming in from all corners of the kingdom, unusual shifts in the weather, crops failing despite the advancements, and a sense of unrest among the common folk. The balance that had once been so carefully maintained was beginning to tip. Mother warned me, Eldoria muttered to herself, her mind racing. Eldoria had always spoken of the delicate balance between magic and nature, how one could not replace the other without consequence. She had been right, and now Eldoria felt the full weight of her responsibility. Darius, now a staunch supporter of Eldoria's vision, stood beside her. We've done all we can. The integration of the machines has made life easier for many, but we've overlooked some of the old ways. Eldoria turned to face him, her voice heavy. We relied too much on progress. I thought we could combine the two forces without considering how one might weaken the other. We didn't know the full impact, Darius said, his voice soft. But we can still fix this. Eldoria nodded, but doubt lingered in her heart. I don't know if we can undo what's been done. Magic is not just a tool, it is a living force, a part of the very fabric of the land. And now her voice trailed off as she looked out over the horizon, where the once vibrant fields of Eldoria were now eerily still. As weeks passed, Eldoria and her advisors worked tirelessly to find a solution. The magical energy that had once flowed through the land like a river seemed to have been disrupted, and no matter how many spells they cast or rituals they performed, the land remained unyielding. One evening a messenger arrived from the distant city of Calaran, the kingdom's great center of technological advancement. The letter was simple but carried heavy news. The machines once heralded as the future had begun malfunctioning. Some had even started draining energy from the very ground they stood upon, further weakening the land's natural magic. The reality of the situation hit Eldoria hard. The kingdom was at the brink of a crisis. The hope of progress had come at a cost, one she had not foreseen. Desperation led Eldoria to seek out old, forbidden texts that had been hidden away in the deepest parts of the citadel. There were whispers of a power known as the Heartstone, a relic from the ancient world, said to hold the ability to restore balance between magic and nature. It was rumored to have been lost during the time of the first kings, hidden away to protect the kingdom from its potential dangers. With no other option left, Eldoria made the decision to search for it. The journey was perilous. Eldoria, accompanied by a small group of trusted allies, set out to find the Heartstone. The path led them deep into the Forbidden Forest, a place where magic had once run wild and untamed, where the forces of nature were strongest. The further they ventured, the more Eldoria felt the weight of her choices. The trees whispered of forgotten spells of lost magic. The air itself seemed thick with the history of the land. As they reached the heart of the forest, Eldoria stood before an ancient altar, covered in moss and vines. There, hidden beneath the roots of a giant oak, lay the Heartstone, its surface glowing with an ethereal light. Eldoria reached out, her fingers brushing the smooth stone. A surge of energy shot through her, filling her with a power unlike anything she had ever felt. It was both familiar and foreign, as though the very essence of Eldoria was alive within the stone. "Do you understand now, Eldoria?" A voice echoed in her mind. It was not Eldoria's voice, but something ancient, something tied to the land itself. Eldoria's heart raced as she whispered, "I understand. This power, it was never meant to be wielded. It was meant to be nurtured, preserved. I've been trying to force the land to bend to my will, and in doing so, I've broken it." The Heartstone pulsed in her hand, and Eldoria felt the deep magic of Eldoria flooding her senses. She had the power to restore the land, to heal the damage done by her decisions. But she also understood that this power came with a heavy price. To use the Heartstone's magic would require a sacrifice. She turned to her companions, her heart heavy. "We cannot fix this without paying a cost," she said. "The Heartstone can heal the land, but it will demand something from us in return. I will be the one to bear the burden of that sacrifice." The decision was made. With the Heartstone in hand, Eldoria returned to Eldoria, her heart torn. She could feel the weight of her choice bearing down on her, but she knew it was the only way to restore the balance. The ritual was long and grueling, drawing on every ounce of her magical strength. As Eldoria chanted the ancient words, the Heartstone's light grew brighter, casting a brilliant glow over the land. The earth trembled, and for a moment, Eldoria felt as though the very fabric of existence was being pulled apart and remade. When the light faded, Eldoria collapsed to the ground, her body drained and her magic exhausted. But as she looked up, she saw something beautiful. The fields of Eldoria, once dying, were now lush and green again. The air was alive with the hum of magic, and the machines that had once drained the land's energy were now silent, their power restored to the earth. But at what cost? Eldoria could feel her magic, her connection to the land, diminishing. The Heartstone had taken much from her. She had sacrificed her own ability to wield magic to be a conduit for the land's power. Eldoria would thrive, but she would never again possess the strength she once had. As she looked out over the restored kingdom, Eldoria knew that she had made the right choice. She had restored balance to Eldoria, but at the cost of her own magic. The kingdom would flourish, but she would remain a humble ruler, a guide to her people, not a sorceress, but a symbol of the sacrifice that true leadership required. A quiet flame. Years passed and Eldoria flourished. The balance between magic and technology had been restored, and the people lived in harmony once more. Eldoria, now an elder herself, had passed on her wisdom to the next generation, guiding them with the quiet strength of experience rather than the power of magic. Her legacy, like the Heartstone, was not one of unchecked power, but of balance, sacrifice, and the understanding that true leadership was not about wielding magic, but about knowing when to step back and let the land heal. The flame within her had dimmed, but it still burned quietly, guiding, protecting, and ensuring that Eldoria would never again fall into the darkness of the past. The quiet of the flame. Years had passed since the restoration of Eldoria, and the kingdom flourished in ways Elira had once only dreamed of. The land was vibrant once again. Its magical pulse steady and true, and the people lived in harmony, a delicate balance between the ancient magic of the world and the advances of technology. Yet for all the outward peace, Elira knew that the heart of the kingdom beat in the silence of her choices. The heartstone, its glow now dimmed, rested in the vault beneath the citadel, its power having been fully realized. It had restored the land, but in doing so, it had taken more than Elira had expected. The magic that once flowed through her veins, fierce and unyielding, was no longer a part of her. She had given it up freely, knowing that her sacrifice would ensure Eldoria's future. But still at times, she felt a deep ache within her, a reminder of the power she had once commanded now gone. Elira often found herself walking alone through the gardens of the citadel, her steps slow and measured. The kingdom had changed and so had she. The fire that once blazed so brightly within her was now a quiet ember, its warmth still present, but no longer consuming. "Are you ever going to rest, mother?" came a soft voice from behind her. Elira turned to see Elira's daughter, Lysandra, standing at the edge of the garden, her eyes filled with curiosity. Lysandra, now a young woman of 16, had inherited much of her mother's strength, but her magic was different. It was quieter, more controlled, as if the flames of the past had tempered her. The people loved her, for she embodied both the wisdom of Elira and the new era Eldoria had embraced. Lysandra was poised to become a great leader, one who would guide the kingdom into its next phase. "I'm just thinking," Elira replied with a soft smile, "about how much has changed and how much remains the same." Lysandra stepped closer, her gaze following her mother's. "I've heard the stories, the tales of the Ash King and the Eclipse Order, and of your battles. I sometimes wonder if I'll ever have to face a challenge like that." Elira's heart swelled with pride and sadness all at once. She had raised Lysandra in a time of peace, where the kingdom was no longer threatened by the forces of darkness that had once nearly destroyed them. But she also knew the weight that came with legacy, the weight of being the child of a ruler who had once toppled a throne and sacrificed everything for the good of the kingdom. "You will face challenges, Lysandra. Every leader does," Elira said gently. "But the greatest challenges are not always the ones that are fought with fire. The hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, decisions made in the quiet moments when you don't have all the answers. It's not about the magic you wield, but the choices you make." Lysandra nodded, taking in her mother's words. "You always say that, mother. About balance and sacrifice. I don't know if I can ever understand it the way you do." Elira smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "You will. In your own way, in your own time." The days passed, and as the kingdom continued to thrive, Elira's role slowly shifted. She was no longer the fiery leader who had toppled a throne, she was the wise elder, a guide to those who sought her counsel. Lysandra, with her quiet strength and clear vision, was becoming the new face of Eldoria, the one who would lead the kingdom into the future. Though Elira no longer had the magic to fight battles, she had something far more valuable, the wisdom of experience. And as Lysandra took on more responsibilities, Elira often found herself quietly advising her, helping her navigate the challenges of leadership. But despite the peace, Elira could never fully shake the sense of unease that lingered in her heart. She had known from the beginning that peace was a fleeting thing, that shadows always lurked just beyond the horizon. And while Eldoria had thrived under her reign, the kingdom would always face the same temptation to seek power and control. One evening, as Elira walked through the citadel's halls, she encountered an unexpected visitor, a cloaked figure standing at the entrance, their face hidden in shadow. The figure spoke in a voice that sent a chill down her spine. "Queen Elira, the time is not yet over," the figure said. "The flames that you extinguished have only smoldered. There are those who would still see Eldoria fall." Elira's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped, foolishly, that Eldoria's days of darkness were behind them. But this voice, filled with both malice and knowledge, reminded her that the kingdom was never truly safe. The figure stepped closer, their cloak swirling like a shadow. The legacy of your magic will never die. And there are those who would seek it for their own. Eldoria stood tall, her eyes narrowing. Though the fire within her had dimmed, she was still the queen of Eldoria, and she would never let her kingdom fall into the hands of those who sought to corrupt it. Who are you? She demanded, her voice steady despite the growing unease. The figure smiled, their eyes gleaming from beneath the hood. I am no one and everyone. I am the shadow that lingers, the flame that waits. And you, Queen Eldoria, have only delayed the inevitable. With that, the figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving Eldoria standing in the empty hall, her heart heavy with the realization that her work was far from over. A new flame. In the months that followed, Eldoria began to prepare Lysandra for the challenges ahead. The shadowy figure's words haunted her, but she kept them to herself for fear of worrying her daughter. Still, she knew that the balance she had fought so hard to preserve would always be fragile. Lysandra had grown stronger, more confident, but Eldoria had seen the same fire in her eyes that she had once possessed. Eldoria knew that the time was coming when her daughter would have to face the same difficult decisions that she had once made. And so as the sun set over the land of Eldoria, Eldoria stood with her daughter, looking out over the kingdom. The flame that had once burned so brightly within her had faded, but it still flickered in the heart of the kingdom. Eldoria was at peace for now. But peace, like fire, was not eternal. It was a flame that could always be rekindled. And in Lysandra's hands, Eldoria knew the flame would never be extinguished.